All right, Bob, it's time for a little Bob and Dina chat. Maybe it's kind of our armchair chat with some of the recent episodes we've had here on the pod with Dr. Kutnick, Dr. Roxanne Vogel, and just some of the other conversations you and I have had over the last few years about carbohydrates, fueling the athlete, metabolic efficiency, even with Dr. Marco Altini,
Right.
periodization of nutrition, a lot of these things, it's kind of like a big pot of topics that are super relevant for our athlete listeners and coaches and other dietitians and nutrition professionals that listen. But I thought it would be a good opportunity to maybe assimilate a few things. And in particular, I was curious if we could talk about some of your viewpoints and perspectives of how metabolic efficiency training is fitting
Mm.
into many of these concepts.
Yeah, it's a good. I feel like this is a necessary, episode and update because there has been so much coming out from, feeding high carbohydrates and gut training for high carbohydrate consumption. And then there's, the paper that came out and we interviewed Dr. Andrew Kutnick about this, this paper, which everyone's on that bandwagon also like, oh, that one is more like, oh, so we don't need as many carbohydrates per hour, maybe 10 to 40 grams. It's all over the place, right, D? So
Yeah.
yeah, this is going to be a good conversation. I feel like listeners buckle up because we're going to go on a few different topics. It's all about metabolic efficiency training, but we're going to talk about some testing. We're going to talk about the training, the implementation models, and kind of just where we're at right now, right? I feel like what's cool about metabolic efficiency training, D, and you know this, I'm speaking to the choir, but for everyone listening, it's not diet based. It's always been about how do you periodize your macronutrients to support better blood sugar control, better insulin, better health, right? It's always been about that, which is kind of cool, and that will never change. You can periodize your macronutrients differently, which means you can alter your food, right? Your carbs, protein, fat to have higher or lower carb, higher, lower protein, higher, lower fat to induce different physiological consequences in your body. Like that's the beauty of it, right? It's not like this high carb, low fat diet. It's not low carb, high fat. It's not keto. It's not carnivore. Like the beauty of it has always been, what do you want to achieve in terms of health and performance, and even, which we'll talk about, carbohydrate consumption during training or racing. Metabolic efficiency training is all about that. It's just
Yeah.
you just need to implement differently in terms of periodizing your macros, right? And that's kind of what we talked to Marco Altini about also.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Maybe along those lines, diving into that for a minute, Bob, is that review paper that we'll link in the show notes with Noakes and Dr.
Mhm.
Kutnick and Prinz and a couple other researchers in the space. It sounded like even in that conversation with him, there was a comment along the lines of like, you can follow whatever daily nutrition plan you
Yeah.
want.
Yeah.
Both can work.
Hmm.
But what are the implications? And I think that health card gets missed,
Yes. Oh
especially
my
when you
gosh.
consider the aging athlete
So
or the
much.
one with other, conditions or family medical history coming into the picture. So I wonder if you could talk on that. Has your perspective changed at
Mm.
all? Like if you could do a edition 4 right now of your book,
Hmm.
would you adjust anything in that daily recommendation for the importance of looking at the daily plan and that periodization aspect without
Yeah.
regard to fueling workouts and races and
Yeah.
competitions?
It's a good question, D. And I'm reflecting as you just asked that question because when I wrote the first edition, I mean, this was almost 20 years ago, right?
Yeah.
I'm forgetting the actual first published date, but anyway, it's been almost 20 years from that first edition. And, with that, I was 20 years younger. And I think it's just to
Mm,
say, not that we're old, but as we go through this game of life and we level up in age, our priorities change, right? And maybe that's not right. Maybe our priorities don't change because personally, like I've always had a great priority, a top priority of improving my health. Although in my 20s, I would probably argue I didn't. It
yeah.
probably wasn't until like 30s. Okay. Anyway, that said, with all that, basically what I'm saying is now that I am a master's athlete, right? I am actually really paying more attention to the health implications, consequences, benefits of daily nutrition, right? Because again, N of one, but all the hundreds of athletes I work with, when we do blood work, when we do hormone tests, when we do all these things, I'm seeing some pretty messed up things. And I'm sure you are too, D, because of the aging process, right? Now,
Yeah.
it's not to say 20, 30-year-olds are not seeing this also. Yes, I'm actually seeing some very interesting aberrations with their blood work also, but not on this topic. So to your point, yes, I would change things. I would change my mindset to stress even more how important it is to periodize your macros, to follow metabolic efficiency training for health purposes. And that could be anything from hormones to cardiovascular health, metabolic health. I think those are three things you and I both really do a lot in our practices. I would absolutely put even more emphasis than I have in the past, right? And in the past, you remember, like, one of my favorite sayings is like, you can't perform if you're not healthy, right? But
Yeah.
I would really take that to the nth level now because of what I've been seeing, not only in myself, but also with the other individuals I'm working with who are, 35, 40 years and older,
Hmm.
because you can't argue that with aging comes biological changes. You cannot argue
Hmm.
that, right? So yeah, I would put much more emphasis, and actually we're going to probably go down, I might get on my soapbox a couple times. We might go down some rabbit holes on this, because I do believe I am very, very pointed in my personal and professional opinion on this whole high carbohydrate feeding thing. And I will tell you
Yeah.
why, listeners, somewhere in this episode.
Yeah.
Because when I created this metabolic efficiency training concept, D, you know this, it was the whole purpose is trying to reduce the load of sugar that we consume in our body, because we want to teach our body to use more of our fat stores as energy, preserve more carbohydrates so we don't have to eat as much sugar during training, during racing, right? And just during life in general. Okay, I'll stop
Yeah.
there because I can start
Well,
going off.
here's something that comes up more
Yeah.
now when that statement's heard, I think, Bob, is reducing the load of sugar,
Mhm.
etc. What about the concerns around low carb availability, low
Mm.
energy availability, especially when you see like that headline, like, well, maybe it's 10 grams an hour to
Yeah.
keep performance sustained. That's not considering the overall energy needs of the athlete.
Right. Right.
And I didn't yet want to go to like fueling intra workout or anything yet,
Yeah.
but just curious. I guess we have to go there because it's tied together.
Yeah. I don't think it's necessarily about one number, right? And I think that's what a lot of the research, let me back up, what some research is actually making clear, that it's not about 10 grams of carbohydrate an hour, 40 grams, 90 grams, 120 grams. What's important is, like, we know these ranges exist, and ranges exist for us as professionals to help individuals determine where they should be at, right? Now, again, I would probably step on my soapbox and say, listen, the outside the bell-shaped curve, the, like you mentioned, 10 grams of carbohydrate per hour feeding during exercise, and let's just use 120. I think those are very few and far between. Like, that is not the most of the
Yeah.
population. That's your 1 to 2%, your outliers. I
Hmm.
think the majority of people will be, if we're talking about carbohydrate consumption per hour, I think the majority of people will honestly be somewhere between that 30 to 90 grams of carbohydrate per hour. I just do. I
Yeah.
feel like from our testing, from our work with athletes, everything, I think that's where the majority of people fall. So I feel like a lot of people are taking this whole less than 30, like 10 grams, 20 grams of carbs an hour, and then over 90 grams an hour, really not out of context. But I feel like on the low end, I do feel like, if we're telling people to consume 10 to 20 grams of carbs an hour, D, I share with you, I'm like, I don't know if that's enough to keep you fueled, right? And of course, we need to put this in context. If you're doing, a half marathon, even a marathon, okay, because there's been mouth rinsing carbohydrate data, I mean, that's kind of along those lines anyway. So can you get by with that? Sure. But what if you're doing an ultra? What if you're doing
Yeah.
multi-stage, multi-day? Then to your point, then that underfueling becomes very dangerous, right? So I think in terms of carbohydrate consumption per hour, we need to put the context in, well, how long? Like what's the sport? What's the distance? What's the duration? And what's the competitive level, right? Are they like you or I, just the recreational person trying to have fun and maybe set some PRs, but we're not doing this for our career, or are we doing it for our career? Are we professional athletes where, listen, this is what literally brings the food to the table, right?
Yeah.
And those are the ones which we've talked about on previous podcasts, not to hijack our conversation. Those are the ones we're seeing pushing the 120, 140 grams of carbs an hour because they're elites, they're pros, their physiology is a little bit different, right? They can actually absorb carbohydrates a little differently. But this is what they're doing 40 hours a week, 40 plus hours per week, right? They eat, they train, they recover, they sleep, right? And do over. So those are the ones I think who need to potentially maybe explore this whole high carb gut training thing because their careers kind of depend on it, right?
Hmm.
However, of course, we've seen the exact opposite with elite athletes doing on the lower carb side. So I don't believe there's a right or wrong. I love ranges because it allows us, which we'll talk about, the metabolic efficiency testing, right? Because
Yeah,
that's kind of evolving also with this whole
it
thing. So
is.
let's push the pause button. We'll discuss that later in this episode.
Okay. When we think about some of the findings of that review paper
Mm,
regarding the role of blood sugar levels,
mm,
and that being, again, I'm paraphrasing Bob, but like a determinant of performance. I feel
yeah.
like this gets a little confusing for people because now they hear like, is that all I need to worry about is just maintaining my blood sugar?
Mhm.
And I tried to ask that question of Dr. Kutnick, do we start wearing CGMs now so that
Right.
because there are so many factors, and he noted this too. We have the role of our psychology and
Hmm.
other, environmental factors maybe that influence, like, is this me fatiguing for what reason?
Mm.
And knowing metabolic efficiency is largely based on a premise of stabilizing blood sugar
Yes.
in and out of workouts, in and out of daily life, right? I wondered if your perspectives there are just being validated, supported. Do you have any other comments here
Yeah.
in that vein?
And that's one of the things I really loved about that paper and appreciated because it does support what we've been doing with metabolic efficiency training for 20 years, right? And that is that we don't necessarily need a lot of supplemental carbohydrates coming in during exercise to support blood sugar. But as we've learned, maybe it's not all about blood sugar, right? So we have brain energy metabolism, we have blood sugar, we have glycogen stores. So I think what we're seeing now, and one of the points of that article is to challenge where is the energy, not where is it coming from, but where are the important pieces of the puzzle that we've been missing, right?
Mm-hmm.
So in the past, we've always thought about how much glycogen do you have? Like
Yeah.
that's why we pasta feed and that's why we carbohydrate load, all this stuff, like just fill up your gas tank. And we still do that, right? But the argument is like, is that really the only thing that's contributing energy? Like, is it the only thing we need to worry about? Or do we also need to worry about blood sugar? Do we need to worry about brain energy metabolism? That's what I love is that because those initial, I guess, support findings in that paper is in line with metabolic efficiency training, in which states that once you are metabolically efficient, meaning you can use more fat as energy and store more carbohydrates or just not burn through them as much, right? That leads to feeding less exogenous or supplemental carbohydrates. So it's like what we've been saying for 20 plus years, but it also, there's context here, right? It's
Mm-hmm.
not just going out there and say, I'm metabolically efficient. I'm going to go run a 100-mile race on 10 grams of carbohydrate per hour because Bob and Dina said I only need to worry about my brain energy metabolism and blood sugar level. That's
Yeah.
not what we're saying.
Yeah.
you know so I think there's a lot of context here, but I do appreciate the levels of the onion that are being peeled right now, because it's
Yeah.
not, because in the past it's just one onion, right? The outer layer of the onion was like, you better carbohydrate load, and that's it. And then I feel like I started peeling the onion. I'm like, well, okay, maybe carbohydrate loading is still cool, but what if we peel it and we kind of learn that, wow, if we actually burn more fat, maybe we don't need as big of an onion anymore. Maybe it's a smaller onion, right?
Yeah.
Meaning my illusion of, or my metaphorically statement of smaller onion, less focus on glycogen stores or carbohydrate loading, right?
Yeah.
I think they're all important. I just feel like we need to put things in context. And to your point, also, our daily nutrition really precipitates this whole thing, right? It does. You can train,
Oh,
as we've talked about, you can train your body to use more carbs and store more fat. Therefore, you need more carbs during training because your body's burning more. And you can do the exact opposite, which burning more fat, storing more carbs, right? So, in the one, here's the big thing too, D. You don't need, one is not right. You know, it depends on the situation, the health goals, the performance goals, the longevity goals of the athlete, of the individual. It's not like everyone should be like, oh, I need to burn more fat and store more carbs, or I need to
yeah.
burn more carbs and store more fat. This is why we individualize it, but also why we do testing to see where someone's at, right?
Yeah.
So we can individualize their nutrition based on their physiology.
Maybe we do talk a second here on a couple different athletes, like the
Mm-hmm.
14-hour to 36-hour ultra runner.
Yep.
There's
Same
that.
distance. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Versus a 4-hour marathoner.
Yeah.
Or we could pick different sport and
Yeah. Yeah.
settings, but I'm just wondering for glycogen, muscle glycogen, not
Mm-hmm.
liver, are we needing to think about things differently in terms of carbohydrate oxidation, the use of glycogen, and some of those findings? The more you might consume on your exogenous carbohydrates, right, the more you might actually, which that isn't totally new in the concept, like we might burn more or use more glycogen the more we
Because you're
consume.
eating more. Yeah.
Yeah. So how are you thinking about that? And it's more just, I'm trying to think of questions athletes are having. Like,
Yeah.
I don't know what I'm supposed to do differently now.
Yeah. Yeah. It's, it's a good point because to your point, like, I mean, that's biochemistry. You eat carbs, you burn carbs, right?
Yeah.
So to your point, and this is why sport nutrition started where it started with the carbohydrate story, was like, oh yeah, you need, I mean, back in the days, check, you need to consume 30 to 60 grams of carbs an hour. That's what we used to say,
Mhm.
right? And that was literally because we're trying to keep up with the oxidation rate or the burn rate because we're having these carbohydrate rich gels and drinks or whatever. To your point, our muscle glycogen is also being used. And it's like, you can't keep up. You know, we've always said this, you cannot consume as many carbohydrates as you're burning, right? It's impossible during exercise. I guess it is possible, but you're not going to be really exercising at that point, right? You're going to be walking or standing, you know what I mean? It's hard to keep up with your intake versus output of carbohydrate burn, right? So to that point, I think things have been changing, but they're getting more confusing, right? Because athletes are now like, oh, we're seeing these athletes push in 120 grams of carbs an hour. Should I do that? But now they're seeing these kind of the spillover effect from this new review article saying maybe it's not that. Maybe it is a little bit lower. So I get it. Like athletes are like, oh my gosh, I don't know what to do now. To your point, I mean, you know my stance on this because everyone knows the birth of metabolic efficiency really came from GI distress, right? And I don't want people to consume a lot of sugars during exercise if they have GI distress or they're susceptible to it. That's the whole point of that's the birth of metabolic efficiency training. Now, it's evolved since then because now we know not many athletes or some athletes are blessed with an iron gut, so they don't have to worry about GI distress. So maybe those are the ones that may be able to experiment with higher carbohydrate consumption during exercise. But again, I go back to the whole the more you eat, the more you burn, right? At what point, I mean, that 4-hour marathoner, to me, that's not a concern. The 36-hour 100-miler, that's a big concern for me, right? Because of many different reasons. Because so context wise, we have to put it duration, we have to put it competitive level, but the
Yeah.
duration matters. Duration and intensity matters. I mean, it really does.
What about the carb loading?
So you want my take on carb
Yeah,
loading?
go
Is that what you're
ahead.
getting?
You can go
Um,
on the soapbox too.
Unless someone is doing a structured gut training protocol with a qualified professional sport dietitian, I do not believe carbohydrate loading is necessary most of the time.
Which that is a little different still, right? I mean, even our convo with
Yep.
Roxanne
Yep.
is still to maximize glycogen stores,
Right.
even for granted, she does work with elites, right?
Right.
So
Yeah.
that's that lens. But like for someone like me who might participate in a ultra running
Hmm.
race and probably be ultra hiking quite a
Yep.
lot of that, like
Yep.
my intensity is lower. Yeah, I
Yeah.
don't want to fall apart, but there's so much more to that piece too. So like
I
do it.
think again, it's context, right? So you
Yeah,
brought up a lot of different things. You brought up
right.
you brought up your goals, you brought up the distance. I mean, I'll
Yeah.
tell you straight up, I work with some younger Olympic swimmers. And do we carbohydrate load? I wouldn't say we load, but their normal daily nutrition is definitely more plentiful in
Yeah.
carbohydrates than what your example
Yeah.
just was, right?
Yeah.
So it is about context also. It's not just oh, you're competitive, not competitive. It's also about age. It's about the distances, right? So
Mm-hmm.
what
Yeah.
if you had that same example, but you're like 10K? So would that change? And that's what we do with athletes is like, well, what are we trying
Right.
to do
Right.
here? Is it a 10K or a 100 mile, or, are you Olympic
Yeah.
gold medalist in swimming, or are you just, a 12-year-old swimmer trying to be
Mm-hmm.
the best you can? You know what I mean? So
Yeah.
context matters for sure. Sorry to bring up that young athlete reference. I shouldn't have done that because they actually need more carbohydrates than because based on their developmental level. But that's we've talked about that in the past. So
Yeah.
let's shift back to the adults.
Yeah. Let's see. Where else do we want to go
Yeah.
with
I
this?
just believe there's still a lot of nuances, right? I feel like people take headlines or things like, they're seeing some spillover. Dr. Kutnick is all over social media right now. And they're like, okay, this is great. But then they're hearing something else. Then they hear something
Yeah.
else. And they're hearing,
Yeah.
David Roche having so much success and pushing, what was he doing? 140 grams of
Yeah.
carbon? I don't know.
Mm-hmm.
It's all over the place, right? So I
Yeah.
think the normal transition where we should go now is like, everyone is individual, right? And
Yeah.
maybe this is where we bring up metabolic efficiency testing because I feel personally like still people don't know about metabolic efficiency testing, but there a lot of people still are not using the data in which they should use the data, right? Because they
Mm-hmm.
just don't know, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and I don't know what episodes those were. We've talked about this
Yeah. We
for
did.
sure, right? I feel like a lot of people these days, and I'm generalizing, will do metabolic efficiency testing just to determine if they have that metabolic efficiency point or that crossover point, right? That's maybe, I don't know, 20% of the data you can actually get from a metabolic efficiency test. So especially nowadays, with all this gut training, high carb feeding, low carb feeding, I feel like metabolic efficiency testing should actually really receive like the Emmy right now because it can help with everything that we're talking about, right? Because not only can you determine if you are, or what I like to say is how inefficient you are at using your fat stores as energy, because all of us have some type of inefficiency, right? So you learn that, but also from a qualified professionals who is doing the testing can periodize your daily nutrition based on your physiological results of that test to meet your health and performance goals. So that's one. Yeah, great. But the other things we can do with the testing is nutrient timing. So we can actually see how many calories, how many carbohydrates, how much fat you're burning per hour at different intensities. And then we can get closer at saying, oh, okay, well, if you're burning this many carbohydrates, since we're on the carb story, if you're burning this many per hour, then here is your nutrient timing strategy based on your physiological burn rate, let's call it, right? And I feel like people aren't using that as much in metabolic efficiency testing as a prescriptive tool when
Mm-hmm.
they should, especially when it comes to the question that we get, right? Should I eat more carbohydrates per hour? Or should I train my gut to be able to absorb more carbohydrate per hour? Well,
Mm-hmm.
let's do metabolic efficiency testing first. Let's see where your body is at. And then if we deem appropriate that, yeah, maybe we do some gut training, maybe we do want to increase carbohydrate per hour, then we've got data to use. So we're not just winging it because as we've mentioned in a previous episode, there's no standard gut training carbohydrate feeding protocol right now. So we have to individualize it for every single person. The way we do that is through a metabolic efficiency test to see where you're at currently and to see where we want to get to and to make the plan, like to draw the line in between A and B, basically.
Exactly. And I wondered how you're thinking about the testing too, as there's been more examination in the research and things on the ultra marathoner
Mm.
versus classically, you know, is maybe not as long of distance or duration athletes that we were looking at. And this whole notion of like, well, what's happening to muscle glycogen since at this time, right? We can't
Right.
distinguish between like where is the pool of energy coming
Yeah.
from and kind of map that out. I mean, I think you're also pointing out the nuance that we have to consider. You can't just look at oxidation rates
Right.
and make a prescription. You have to really understand who's in front of you. Like, who is
Yes.
this athlete? What is it we're trying to fix or make better?
Yeah, I mean, I think metabolic efficiency testing is a no-brainer for anyone who is going to do anything ultra based. Okay. So it's a necessity, right? And you can define ultra as, I guess pure definition of ultra is anything in the running world over a 50 miler, right? Or
Yeah.
maybe it's 50K, 50 mile,
50K.
50K.
Yeah. Or
Yeah.
marathon.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So really we're talking about probably, in my definition, it's over 6 hours of activity, right?
Mhm.
Do you need a metabolic efficiency test to be successful in over a 6 hour event? No. Would it really help you so you can have a plan, an action plan that's based on your physiology? So you're not guessing, so you're not wasting money on all these products. You know how,
Yeah.
remember you talked about that once where how much money are we spending on all these
Yeah.
products? Like, do you really need that much? That's the question
Right.
that always begs with me. Do I need this? How much do I need? Do I need to spend $300 a month on these supplements? Like, what do I need? Right. That's one of the benefits of the testing also, is to help determine what do you need so you can kind of structure your product choices and budget somewhat
Mhm.
around your needs.
Yeah. Is there anything coming up as far as gut training, the findings from the Noakes paper, anything that you're reworking or re-emphasizing? I
Yeah,
don't know.
it's a tricky one because when the gut training came out years ago, I was scratching my head. I'm like, ooh, how important really is this? Because you always ask that question.
Yeah.
And I'm not going to disregard, it is very important for some individuals, absolutely hands down, right? What I feel like I want to help athletes do it correctly. And so I've done that with a few athletes, but I feel like right now, a lot of athletes are just throwing spaghetti against a wall and they're like, hey, yeah, maybe I need to consume 90 grams of carbs an hour. I usually consume 60. So you know what? I'm just going to take some extra next time and make that up. And that's probably not the thing to do.
Yeah.
Just because you probably, I mean, maybe 8 times out of 10, you're going to have some type of GI distress, right? So
Mhm.
I feel like what I'm doing is really trying to, again, because a gut training protocol doesn't exist right now, that's good for everyone. I'm just trying to tease out where to start with that, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. And it's really looking at, I mean, obviously, let's use my example of 90 grams. If you want to feed 90 grams of carbs an hour and maybe you're at 50 or 60, okay, we kind of know where we are, where we're going to be. I kind of need to know what you're burning right now, though. So that's where the metabolic efficiency testing comes into play. Otherwise, can you do it without testing? Sure. It's going to take longer. It's not going to be as prescriptive, and you're probably going to waste a lot more money on using products. So why not? I mean, test, don't guess, right? Why not just do the test first to give us a really good baseline of here's where we're at, here's where we want to go. This is how it makes sense to progress you instead of, taking the whole wiggle road around it. I mean, what are you seeing, Dee, with the testing that you're doing?
Yeah, I think part of it is for the testing, meaning if an athlete can come in more than once,
Mm,
is dinking around with some of the protocols to see,
yeah,
like, if you do a long run beforehand and we try and like simulate a little bit more of what's your body going through at hour 10 in a kind of simulation fashion. What can we learn there versus the fasted test or
right,
continuous
right.
pacing? But just until we have some other technology and ways
Yeah.
to look at what we're burning from what we consume,
Hmm.
and just trying to figure out some of that a little bit more. I think again, though, Bob, ultimately it's going back to who are you as an athlete? What are you really wanting to know
Yeah.
and improve to make yourself the best athlete you can be, whatever that is for you,
Yeah.
instead of just
Well,
trying to hit a number for I don't know what reason,
yeah,
right?
totally, totally.
Yeah.
And that's, it also brings up what you just said, it might be more efficacious too to have like a pre and post metabolic efficiency test done if someone is going through a gut training protocol.
Yeah.
Right? Because you need to know where you start, and then you implement the protocol for usually 8 to 12 weeks, right? Have another metabolic efficiency test afterwards to see how well, like to see what's happening in your body. I mean, subjectively you see, but objectively, are you on point or not? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
That would be, I'm just thinking about, wow, where would I go with that? That would be an interesting kind of protocol that I would utilize also. But to your point, you can do so many things with testing. Like you can do the
Exactly.
fasted incremental protocol, which we do for 90% of people. You can do a fasted continuous. You can do a fed continuous. You could do a fed specific race, model test. So
Right.
it's like it kind of depends on the practitioner who's doing the testing and really how much they're connecting with the athlete and what the athlete needs, to your point.
Hmm.
So I mean, to summarize that, metabolic efficiency testing, very applicable still. I mean, again, I feel like it's not even utilized to the extent that it could be utilized by many practitioners. I know you and I use it obviously to the extent, but I feel like it's still the future, because now it's going to help us tease out, is the gut training protocol working if you're using that? And even on the other end of the continuum, like maybe people are not consuming enough carbohydrate per hour, right? And then when we do the test, we actually see, wow, you know what? Consuming 10 or 20 grams
Yeah.
of carbs per hour, that's just not going to do it based on your
Yeah.
physiology, based on your,
Yeah.
quote unquote burn rate. So I think we can use the testing on both ends of the continuum
For
to really
sure.
help someone both with their performance and their health.
Exactly. That's a great point here as we're wrapping up too, Bob. This testing highlights some things going on with health. So not just in sport context, but shining light on some other things that can be happening. And I think that data is just so helpful. Like we've said before, I mean, it's test, not guess,
Yeah.
and the data don't lie.
Yeah.
And so for someone who is just so confused, hearing a whole bunch of different messages, having things like blood work and this kind of testing done, then it can help be impetus for
Mhm.
moving some of that behavior change along and adjusting daily diet, or looking like what is going on here and getting to the root of some of the issues that could be fatigue or
Yep.
things that we think are exercise or training related, and it actually
Yep.
comes back to some health issues. So I
Yeah,
find that super helpful when working with an athlete.
for sure. And let me just to summarize all this also, Dee, because this is N of one. I do blood work testing quite often. And this, please hear me, listeners. You need to do blood work testing, comprehensive blood work testing, at least once or twice a year, because if you're really concerned with your health and performance, this is why I don't consume a lot of sugar per hour during training, because of my blood work, right? Because of my genetics, because of this. Now I try to take care of that in my daily nutrition. What doesn't help, because I've gone through periods of doing like high simple sugars during training and then not high simple sugars during training. What I've seen with my blood work is it responds much more favorably in fasting insulin, fasting blood sugar, HbA1c, specifically those metabolic markers, when I do not consume a lot of sugar, simple sugars per hour. That's me. That's N of one. I'm certainly not generalizing that for everyone, but I wouldn't know that if I didn't correlate and have blood work testing. I would just be like, I'd be like probably everyone else. Do you like, wow, maybe I should try to consume 90 grams of carbs an hour. And I've thought about it, but I always go back to my blood work. I'm like, oh no, remember when I tried not even 90 grams an hour, but just more like 60? And I was like, oh, that throws my markers off from a health perspective. And, I want to do my best in being on this earth as long as I can, right? So I feel like also, which we've had side discussions on, you and I, D, like, wow, I wonder, for these like athletes doing 120, 140 grams of carbs per hour, we always wonder, did they have blood work? Like, I wonder what their
Yeah.
blood work looks like, right? And
Yeah.
maybe it's fantastic. Maybe their genetics are great. Everything is great. That's fantastic. But maybe it's not. I just
Yeah.
feel like that next missing step is please also have comprehensive blood work. Please pop that hood so you can also see, one, what's going on in your body, then two, combine that with metabolic efficiency testing to then have that practitioner provide a very good custom plan for you, instead of just having one or the other and guessing, right? I think that's what people do a lot with metabolic efficiency testing, D, is they're like, oh no, good, just teach me to burn more fat. Well, Can we just look at your blood work first?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, this is just an old lady comment, but it is interesting since you and I have been around and on the planet for a little bit long
Yeah.
time that a lot of these individuals that are pushing the carb max and everything are still in their, let's say, 20s and 30s. That
Mm.
health component, it's on the radar, but
Mm.
it's not as relevant. You can get away with so much when
Mm.
we're
Totally.
younger, but things
Totally.
shift.
What
Yeah.
you're saying, D, is we need data on a 50-year-old plus male and female who is consuming be over 90 grams of carbs per hour and literally trying to feed like a higher rate of carbohydrate during training. I haven't run across anyone in that situation at that age.
It is an interesting call
Yes,
out
yes.
for those individuals.
I almost want to do
Mm.
an N of one test, but I don't want to because I know what's going to
Yeah.
happen to my blood markers.
Same. I'm not really looking forward to that, but
Okay, so not that we're going to do an individual research study on this, but listeners, if you're over 50 and you have any data on this, like
yeah,
if you are someone male or female over 50 and you are consuming 90 grams or more of carbohydrate per hour, I want you to go to our Patreon community, right? Patreon.com/ISN podcast, sign up for our free community
yeah,
and tell us this. Like we
yeah,
want to engage with you because we have so many questions,
yeah.
right? Yeah, yeah, yeah.
And even better, Bob, contact one of us to arrange a test if you haven't
Oh,
done the
yeah.
metabolic testing, and then we
Yep,
can dive in on that. That would be
exactly. But
interesting
wouldn't I
too.
mean, you brought up a really good point, Dee. This is probably the next stage of evolution in this because nobody has, to my knowledge, nobody has looked at the masters athlete, let's just call it over 50, in regards to feeding a high bolus of carbohydrate per hour.
All
Well,
right.
listeners, we don't know what else to say about that, but go to our Patreon account. That's what we're saying, right? Our
Well, it
community.
definitely would be good to hear from y'all. I mean, it's my personal and professional passion set here is the midlife and
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
older
Yeah, yeah.
people. And so, I mean, I'm just not seeing that again. Is that my
Yeah,
bias,
yeah, yeah, yeah.
selection
Yeah,
set here? I don't know. But
exactly, exactly.
anyways, all right, Bob, is there anything else we didn't talk about that's on your mind?
I think we've discussed a lot. I still think, the path is still very, very short right now on all of this gut training, carbohydrate feeding, high carbohydrate feeding per hour. So it by no means is anything definitive because it's so much in its infancy. And I can't wait for the next 10, 15 years of research, of real life, of maybe some masters athlete data, So I still think we're so new in this. Like don't jump on the bandwagon before, you contact someone to help you with this because there are a lot of unanswered questions still.
All right. Well, with that, Bob, we will wrap up this episode. We want to thank all of you for hanging in there in this fun conversation with us, and we can't wait to have you join us on the next episode.